Ready to take your music to the next level? Tune in to the Sound Strategies podcast. Let's keep you, the artist, in the driver's seat of your musical journey.
Welcome to the Sound Strategies podcast. I'm with Drew Thurlow, super rad dude. He's hanging out in the burbs, just moved to the burbs with his family, right? Well, thanks for being with us. You have a storied history in the music industry. And by storied, I mean, there's volumes. So we got to go through them. So let's start picking it apart. Like, why don't you start with like a little bit about like your background? Like where are you from? How'd you get into music? Tell us a little bit about early days, session recordings, live shows that you've played with, bands that you've jammed with, all the good stuff. Give us all the good stuff.
I grew up in Rhode Island, and I think growing up in Rhode Island in the 90s felt as far away from the music industry as you could get. I didn't know anyone involved in entertainment, and I certainly didn't go to New York ever. But I had a band in high school, and we played local clubs in Providence, and it was just some of the funnest things I did as a kid. So I moved to Boston after I graduated college, and I reunited my high school band with my friend who was at Berkeley at the time, and spent a couple years in Boston, a little longer than I expected because I ended up getting a job at the Red Sox, which was a kind of really fun diversion. But after a few seasons there, I decided I wanted to be in music. So I moved to New York, and I got an apartment with some friends from college that were all musicians, and we just started playing bands and trying to record in our apartment. And it went pretty well. Within the first year, my roommates had made a record on a Pro Tools lab that we had set up that became the band Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah. And they kind of had a nice run there in Brooklyn for a while. Which I was tangentially involved with. But I joined a metal band called Satanicide, and we got a contract with Atlantic. And I did some other session work and played in a band with Moby. And after doing some touring and doing that whole thing, I kind of decided I wanted to explore the creative side of the business. So I got a job at Warner Music Group, where I had been introduced to the organization by my playing. And I started out as a marketing assistant at an imprint called Nonesuch. And I stayed there. I spent a few years there doing marketing and A&R. I worked with a whole host of great artists, from the Black Keys to Bjork to Emmylou Harris, and a lot of different kinds of world music, West African music. It was just a really great musical adventure and education. In 2011, it was a pretty depressing time in the recorded music industry. Streaming had just launched but not matured. iTunes was the only game in town, and it wasn't nearly as lucrative for the recorded side of the industry as it had been. So I tried to get a job at Spotify and Pandora, the only two tech streaming companies in business at the time. Spotify wasn't having it, but Pandora was. When I got to Pandora in 2011, I found out I was the first music hire for the company, where they had traditionally been a sales kind of tech organization and an ad sales with a big ad sales team. So I spent an extraordinary 6 years at Pandora doing all kinds of things, from talent buying to doing brand partnerships. I spent 6 months as a lobbyist in Capitol Hill lobbying for streaming rights and copyright law legislation. And then we turned into a traditional DSP after acquiring RDO. So I did content deals and licensing deals, and then more traditional label relations. And then in 2017, as Pandora matured and became just like any other DSP, I was recruited to go over to Sony, where they were really relaunching their Masterworks division. It had traditionally been a kind of classical jazz imprint, and it still was, but they wanted to diversify. This is, by 2017, the major pop labels, the frontline pop labels, were really focused on hip hop and R&B and mainstream pop. They weren't doing songwriters anymore, weren't really doing rock bands, weren't really doing electronic music that wasn't kind of pop EDM. So the Masterworks ambition was to kind of fill in those gaps at Sony. So I did that for a few years, and during COVID, pivoted and did a lot of film and TV score soundtracks and executive produced those, and worked with a whole bunch of different kinds of film and TV properties and some more traditional artists, and just left in January to start my own consulting business. And here I am.
Wow, that was a really, really, really quick summation of a really rich, deep history. So, okay, so you're here today. what has changed? I mean, everything's changed and everything's the same in some ways, right? In the music industry, like, but what has changed in your mind? Like, do you divide the music industry up into like epics, or like how do you in your mind like divide up the music industry over the last 15, 20 years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's interesting because things are definitely cyclical. And I've been doing this long enough that I'm really starting to see patterns in a way that I don't think I would have noticed a few years ago. And I'll give you an example. When I started doing A&R in 2007, it was a very different job. It was a talent evaluation, musical evaluation of music. And that was what my background was. I studied music theory. I know songwriting. I know recording techniques and production. And if you put me in a room, I can tell you who's a compelling artist that will probably find an audience, and I can tell you something that maybe not. And no one's right all the time, but and then by the time I left my last A&R job about 8 months ago, it was a data analytics role. You're really looking for assets, musical assets that are proving their concept and have an audience. And I noticed the same thing in professional sports when I was working for the Red Sox. The old scouts used to be these old ball players who were, could recognize a fastball and recognize a guy could hit it. And then the new guys that were running baseball teams by then were nerdy Ivy League graduates who never picked up a bat in their life, but were evaluating players based on data and analytics and using players as an asset. So I noticed those same themes. One of the reasons why I think I kind of left A&R too is because the Italian evaluation was way less important than having a good data analytics platform where you could project based on numbers. So definitely seeing some cyclical things there. And streaming has been a very disruptive and interesting part of the ecosystem. I was around for the beginning of it, and now we're starting to see streaming maturing in a lot of ways in major markets and in users, especially in the kind of valuable and rich markets that really drive the commercial music industry, like the US and Western Europe. And the emphasis pre-streaming was, okay, well, you're an artist, develop your career, develop your craft, find fans, hit the road, and then that will lead to a real career. And in the streaming era, we kind of got away from that. You could get some revenue if you got on a playlist and you didn't necessarily need to convert that person to a fan. You just needed to get them to hear your song. So there was a lot of emphasis on getting onto playlists and getting in front of the curators and making sure that you had a steady stream of content coming out. Quantity mattered more than quality. And now that we're seeing streaming maturing and we're seeing the whole concept of playlisting kind of decline as a driver, now the emphasis back on developing artists and having careers and being original and using the old tools that used to matter to really start your career. So that's, as someone who really cares about playing and craft and, was a little dubious that we wanted to live in a world where music was treated as an asset class entirely. I'm really glad that's true, but it's also interesting that it's, the technology has come so far that we're back to where we started, at least where I started.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. I come from like more of a soccer. I played baseball as a kid, but like soccer was like my main sport. And like I have such like a recruiter's mentality, but when you get into like treating like pro soccer players as like an asset class and just based on, data analytics and like not off of their flavor as a athlete,
or what they can intangibles they can bring to a team or leadership. You miss something.
Leadership. You're missing a lot of the story. And so like for me, it's like, you're saving a lot of time and maybe like a lot of resources because you don't have people, you're not paying people to, travel around the world and watch these people in their element, but you're missing so much of it. So, and it's kind of not as fun, like there's something really fun about like betting on somebody, right? And like seeing how they work and just being like, I'm choosing this artist to develop, and like to bring in house to develop because I see something in them,
and that,
as opposed to be like going through my sheet, my spreadsheet.
Look at the business you're already doing. There's good and bad things about it. I mean, I do love the fact that it's that this data driven leading for commerce is democratize the process. I mean, you don't have to meet someone like me, and I don't have to see you play in order for you to get a shot now. There's definitely a good part of that where if you do something cool and people start resonating with it and they're consuming your music and they're following you on socials, then instead of me opening the door for you, you've opened the door for yourself, and someone like me would come across and see it. And I think that's great to democratize that process. But that comes with some other issues too around, how much an artist these days has to manage, which is dizzying. So it doesn't get necessarily easier, it just gets different.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there's like the weight is, there's so much weight put on artists' shoulders that has nothing to do with creating music, at this point where it's like you got to be dedicated to making this dream work, because it's just it's a lot. I get that question a lot from young artists. Yeah. Like they want to know what to do, and they there's no magic bullet. There's no like, I can't tell you some kind of like aha moment. Like if you do this with your Instagram feed and have this kind of content on TikTok and this release cadence, then that means there's no substitution for the hard work. And I tell this story a lot, and I think it's pretty emblematic of today's industry. There is a Broadway show, the Carole King musical. I forget what it was called. It was up on Broadway for quite a while. Yeah. And there was a story about Carole King starting her career. She lived in a house in Long Island, and she would commute to the Brill Building every day and write songs and then go home. And she had a legitimate, lucrative career doing that. And then it changes her career in the 70s. Well, that wasn't enough. Then she had to actually perform these songs. So then she had to write them and perform them. And then she wasn't enough to perform them. Then she had to tour them. So now she has to be a writer, good at traveling and logistics, and a performer. Cut to now, I mean, what have we added onto that? You have to be in your own digital marketing agency. You have to be like adept at the social game. You have to be your own accountant. You have to be your own business manager. Yeah. You have to somehow do all of those things. Got to design your own merch.
Your own graphic designer. And then you got to somehow develop enough skills to be competent in all of those things. And then you also have to put aside time to be creative and create. Like it's just, to the people that are making a go of this and trying, like I have so much respect because it is so hard. So it's hard. Yes, these tools have been given to you, and you don't need an institution or a label in order to have a career anymore. But the trade-off is that no one else is doing it for you.
Right. Yeah, the democratization has led to like the endless amount of work, right? Like just
and at least during the album era, you could kind of disappear. You could like make a record, have your 1.5-year cycle, and then drop off the map for a bit while you wrote and recorded again. Now I call it keeping the faucet on. There's no album cycle anymore. You are on 24/7, 365 days a week. So yeah, it's relentless.
It is totally relentless. Yeah. So I don't know. I randomly subscribe to Lord's, like, I don't know, it's like a Substack or something. She has some sort of newsletter. And a couple days ago, she was reading, or she had written a newsletter, and then it kind of came out kind of canned. So like a couple days later, she rewrote it. And when she rewrote it, she was just like really pretty raw and was like, yeah, like I'm going through some stuff. Like, I didn't show up at this event. First time I've ever not showed up at this awards event, whatever. And she just like kind of like spilled, like kind of opened up her heart a little bit to her fans a little bit more, and was just like, yeah, like there's times where you're just like the biscuit you're eating for breakfast doesn't taste good. It doesn't taste like anything because like life just turned off for you, like, and I just read this a couple days ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, she can't really turn off, like she can tell her manager she's not going to show up to this, this event for a week, but she can't really just like check out for 6 months, a year, and then come back.
No. And some of those artists at her level I've worked with too, they also have a certain responsibility for their teams. and the people that work for them. Like, I'm sure she feels responsible for her crew and her bus drivers and her business managers and her agents. And when you take people's money and you enter into professional relationships with people, and I've been on both sides of this, like you feel an obligation to do your best, and it's hard. So not only does she feel the burnout of being an artist in this era, she probably feels a lot of responsibility for other people's livelihoods in some way. So yeah, it's real stressful.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so it's just we're just entering like an interesting era too in music where like I feel like we go in cycles too, like around how much an artist as a brand will sort of share with their audience too, and their fans and their super fans.
It's
And that kind of goes in cycles as well, right?
Yeah, it's a decision. I mean, not every artist is comfortable, showing their personal life, and not every artist loves doing social media. So I know I've pressured artists to be on social media more than they want to, and it's not because I want to torture them or anything. It's because that's the best way to reach your fans and create new ones, and it's just the beast. And I think when artists are reaching and maturing and reaching stages of their career where they're entering into partnerships with institutions or labels or agents or anyone else that are partnering with you on your business side of your career, I think it's important to recognize, like, okay, what are your obligations here? Because if you're taking money, then you're gonna have to pay it back eventually. So you got to make sure you're in a place where that's possible, or else you're doing a disservice to your career.
Right. So speak of doing a disservice to your career, what's the future of, like, if Carole King came to you today, and I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, like there's no magic bullet, right? But what does that trajectory look like? It's a little different now, right? And I know it's swinging back a little bit as well to back, where we were prior to streaming, but what do you see the career trajectory looking like for from now until, the next 10 years or so? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think that it's been interesting being a kind of general music tech consultant the last several months, because it's different than I thought it would be. And it's different mostly because all anyone wants to talk about right now is AI. It's like AI all the time. And some people are freaked out by it, and some people are excited by it, and some people don't know what to make of it. But I think that if someone like Carole King came to me today, I think the things that were still true back then are true now, which are, you remember who you are. You're a musician. Work on your craft. Get better. Make sure that your image and your visuals match what you want to express as an artist. Make sure they match the music you're making. Make sure you're showing up where your fans are. Make sure that if you do start getting some real fans, that you cater and take care of your first 1,000 fans, 100 fans, 1,000 fans, 10 fans, 10, whatever it may be. Those are your early fans that'll be with you for a while, and those are the fans that are going to invest in you and buy your merch. Yeah. And you can count on for being there. And I would say not forget, but I would also say technology is giving you a tool, and it might be a lot to manage, but it's giving you a tool to keep developing. And I think with AI, we're seeing that hyper boosted on steroids, where now you might have to, and I've just so many companies out there in the music tech space are developing tools for artists and creator tools that are trying to create efficiencies around your workflow. Everything from tools to help you create faster, tools to help you mix and master without, having to pay for it, to tools to get better distribution, tools for you to kind of like give you analytics on who your fans are, tools to make sure your fans are all living in one place so you can speak to them to the same. I saw a few great ones around the ticketing and touring industry about tools to like help you get better data around your touring, and tools to help you write and produce social content. These might be text prompt video images, which you can make social content, which I think a large part of an artist's career these days is just like keeping up with all the needs of making social content. So tools to help you make social content. Yep. So it's yet another thing to manage, but it's also more in your toolkit that you can use to further your career before you go and sign a record deal or take some money. And then if you don't want to sign a record deal or take some money, then there's some financing options that are, technologically driven financing options out there where you can come up with some capital without having to license or give away your masters. So there's a way for you to find enough out there where you can have the career you want, and it can tailor to the needs you're looking for and the skills you need to supplement with. So it's an exciting time for artists, but it's also, the other thing is to make sure you're in it for the right reasons. If you want to be rich or famous, then, don't do this, because this isn't glamorous and it's not fun all the time. But if you really feel like you have something you want to share with the world and you have something to say and you really commit to your craft, then there's ways for you to make a good go of it and, put the tools in your hands.
Yep. Yeah, that's I mean, I would say the same exact thing. Like the UX, I'd say like AI tools that I'm using the most. David Boyle. I don't know if you've heard of David Boyle. He does like a lot of market research stuff, but he created a book called Prompt, and he created it like right when like ChatGPT got like, a bazillion, signups. Like I would say like he released this book like first month ChatGPT really took off.
Good timing.
And he basically just like I don't know, his timing was impeccable, but he basically like did a series of them. So like I think he did one for entertainment and media. So he just basically breaks down all the prompts that you could use as an indie artist using ChatGPT to basically like make your marketing process faster, make your customer segmentation process faster, like basically like breaking down your whole, like every aspect of your marketing strategy as an artist. Like he helps you to figure that out so quickly with his prompts. And I thought that was so fascinating, because I was like, at first I was like, ooh, this seems gimmicky, like I'm like, I'm not sure. But like I got his book, I like downloaded his book, and I got like a free copy from him, and I was like, I started reading it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this actually is going to speed up the process, like the marketing process for artists is like undoubtedly, like this is going to, if I have one artist starting from, using no AI tools, and then one artist that's using, AI tools with some prompt help, like the other one's gonna take, months and months longer to develop themselves. And you know, so it's I think like that adage that's been thrown around is like totally true, which is like AI is not gonna replace your job, but it's gonna but not using it is going to put you at a clear disadvantage, against your peers.
That's an interesting I have a kind of two thoughts on that. Number one, I had that same experience. I was helping out a Americana songwriter that I know, and I just put into ChatGPT like I'm, the prompts that you would think ChatGPT would need to come up with in a marketing plan. Like, here's who I am, here's what my metrics are, and it spit out a marketing plan. And someone who used to write marketing plans, it was really good. It was good. It was like what you would expect if you went to sign to a indie label. And executing on that is another story, but there is that tools in your hands. And second thing about your last point, which I think is really important about using these tools, that if you don't, you might be left behind. I think the important thing, and I've heard this from talking to investors, and I'm talking to companies and artists and people even outside of the music space when it comes to AI. I don't think anyone is interested in tools that replace people or humans. They're interested in tools that augment and are additive to the process, especially in the creator economy. So I know I've talked to a lot of VCs and investors and private equity and anyone involved that in the monetization of music as either artists or catalogs or assets or anything. And they're very interested in looking for tools that augment the process and not replacement. So I think that the ethics around AI have been pretty clearly spelled out by both industries, people, and governments. And I think that's an important point, is that these are tools that you should use them, and you shouldn't be afraid of them, because I think people are interested in the way they can help you. But you really should learn how to use some of this stuff, because if you don't, then you're leaving an advantage on the side.
You are, yeah, exactly, exactly. It's like, I hate to compare it to baseball, but like it really is like, I mean, you look at somebody who's used steroids over the years, and you're like, ooh, like they did have like slight advantage,
Turns
right?
out
Like
it works.
like turns out it actually worked. I mean, it's not a good way to, it's not popular, but like it turns out
Yeah.
it worked.
And
And
the
so
difference is steroids is
I feel
illegal.
like
That's the difference. ChatGPT is not illegal.
right. Exactly, exactly. And I think like there is like this like fine line though, like because there's things that are legal and that are, not moral. There's things that are moral and
Yeah.
not legal,
Yeah.
So like the ethical ramifications too, I think have been mostly spelled out, but I think people don't know, people who aren't building the AI themselves or aren't really deeply entrenched in music tech or in tech in general, like I think they have a hard time like knowing which tools that they can use that aren't going to get them in trouble, like and even like, how far can they go on their song using AI, right? Before it's not acceptable,
Yeah.
by the
and those
industry, right? As a
and
unique
those and you're right, and no, the answer is nobody knows. I mean, there's so much up in the air about what's legal, what's not. Is using protected IP and training data illegal? No, there's nobody knows. There's some court cases getting through the courts right now that are tangential to music that are going to help settle some of these things. But if you talk to a lot of IP and music lawyers, and half they're split. Most of them think that it's probably not going to be okay to use copyrighted material when you're training an algorithm, and that the output would be at least some level have ownership by the training data IP holders. But some people are like, no, that's fair use.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason why that can't be considered parody. So there's so much uncertainty around what's going to be not only legal, but also, as you said, ethical.
Right. Legal, ethical. Exactly. So yeah, so it's a fascinating time to be alive. I'll say that much. Yeah, crazy. So we talked before we got on this podcast, we talked a little bit about a blog post that Allison, our CTO at Tonic Audio, had written. And I had asked her to write it because she had been playing around, she had been playing around with the song, and she had been in, there's a ton of these, I'd say like feedback groups and things like that inside of Discord, right? And like that was kind of like the inspiration for starting Tonic came from some of these groups these Discord servers we were in, where we were realizing like people were actually they were actually providing services that like a small sort of like community label would provide for each other, but they were doing this all inside of this community. So we kind of like that kind of got our wheels turning about like, how could we kind of replicate these communities for all sorts of micro genres around the world, right? And so one of the challenges, they do a lot of remix challenges, and we always think of like remix challenges like being, like EDM related or dance music related, DJ related, but like they're using it as indie artists to like, get people to kind of lean in, listen to their music, to get, find other collaborators, to kind of upskill themselves as musicians. So Allison was in this one challenge, and she was like, the challenge was so dumb. It was like literally like, pick a song that you hate so much that like every time it comes on the radio, you turn it off, right? And so people picked all sorts of things like, I don't know. Like
I don't want to presume, but I was going to guess like a lot of Nickelback or something.
Yeah, there was Nickelback. There was Macarena. There was or the rest in peace, but the Hawaiian guy with the Over the Rainbow ukulele song.
Right.
Yeah, the one that's like somehow ends up on every Spotify playlist you've ever like. I think
that guy
like you're like, how is
I know that guy, I think that guy has like I think Beyonce just broke it, but he had like won the most Grammys in history because every year there was like used to be a Hawaiian music category, And he would like, of course, he would just win it every year. And then after like 30 years, the Grammys were like, maybe this isn't reflective of popular music anymore. We should sunset this category. So anyway.
Interesting. Yeah. That makes so much sense now. He ended up on like every playlist, even though that song like did not fit the playlist. Like you're like, oh my gosh, how is he on this playlist? Like he's like haunting it, you know, like it was just like crazy. So we had like that one. And then, so she got assigned the song Rude by that band called Magic.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, I don't know how she had never run into this song, but she had never heard this song. And I was like,
I don't know how she's never heard that song.
But she never heard the song. Right. And she hated it immediately. So it worked. I mean, it still fit the contest. She hated it immediately. And she went through, like, she's very technical, right? She's our CTO. She's like a developer. So she can hack. She's also like a hacker. Like she can hack electronic stuff together and stuff. So she like, and fixes, you know, like any, you know, she can fix tube amps and all this stuff. So she is technical. Like, I don't recommend doing this process for like the rest of us, but basically what she did is like, she described in this blog post that like how she took this song Rude, and it's, you know, it's a little, what would you describe? Like what genre was that? That was like,
so I think let me quickly. I think
song, because like if you can't play that song to people, it's like
generally Western audiences don't like reggae, but every 20 years a reggae flavored song gets smash hits. Like it was red wine in the like 90s, and then it was Mr. Boombasta, whatever it was in the 2000s, and then it was it's like clockwork. It's like Magic Rude. It's like this guy. His singer was a songwriter. They're Canadian. He's written for some big artists, and he started this band and wrote this song. It's a like a ska reggae themed song, and it was a smash hit. And then I think the band is now no longer. But
yeah. That's you nailed it. It's like a ska reggae, and it's definitely in that vein where it's like every 20 years they hit it again, and these guys hit the jackpot. Okay, so she takes that like song, and she's like, okay, the ska reggae voice just like gets on my nerves, like it's like just grates on me. So she then like did a bunch of technical stuff and like jumped through a bunch of technical hoops to then basically replace his vocals with Billie Eilish AI generated vocals. Yeah. And then she remixed the whole song, you know, with that. But you listen to her version with Billie Eilish in it, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's actually a palatable song. Like I actually kind of like that song. But when you listen to it with the original vocals, you're like, ooh. But okay, so my whole point around this is that I just think it's like so interesting because she had to do so many things to make that happen and to make the vocals sound right. I mean, like we are like, somebody mentioned this the other day that we're having our mid-journey moment for music.
Yeah,
like
we are.
8 months ago, a year ago, we were like, when's this when's it going to happen? When's it going to be good enough that we care that much about AI? And I think we are finally having that. And like this for me was like the defining moment, like hearing that you could just replace vocals with somebody else's like voice, intonation, like tone, everything. It like, that's just insane. Like she didn't sing the song. You didn't have her. We weren't recording her, you know, singing that song. Like
that's happening.
So that just like blew my mind, you know? Yeah. And that's,
so you mentioned that she had to kind of like go through a few processes. And one of the things we've learned about this AI world is that things get very good very quickly. And when I started researching and working in this space consistently and around March, you really couldn't make an acoustic guitar or another kind of acoustic instrument sound that great. And by late April, that wasn't true anymore. So there's kind of three. Yeah, what you're describing is a AI voice model replicator, and it's a very easy process. It can be technically tedious, but it basically, you feed a model a bunch of stems of someone's voice, whether it be your own or some famous singer. And now there's very easily found stem separation technology out there. So you can go grab an iTunes or a YouTube link and just grab the vocal stems easily for free, which wasn't possible 2 years ago. You feed into this model, and then it
Yep.
creates this artifact that lets you lay someone's voice on top of another signal. And there's kind of three main ways you do it. The most popular one is one's called Sovit's SVC. It's a piece of Python code, and I'm sure that's what she was doing. And it replaces the original vocal stem, which is still there, but it's on top of it is layered this new model of this whatever other voice you trained it on. And you go on YouTube, you want to find Roger Rabbit singing Billie Eilish, you can find it. You want to find Freddie Mercury singing any song, a lot of like Juice WRLD, especially some of the artists that have passed away recently, XXXTentacion. You want to hear him singing anything? I mean, it's all out there. And when there's a new technology like this, artists use it to be creative and to kind of create new things. And other people use it for fraud.
Yep.
They're kind of on the same one side of the same coin. So right now, the people that are taking Billie Eilish's voice and you know, what your CTO did was completely above board, and it was, you know, she's not pretending to be Billie Eilish, and she wasn't trying to represent Billie Eilish like that was. He wasn't trying to. It's a
Right.
what's considered illegal is if she was trying to confuse a consumer that this is Billie Eilish. So she was not doing that. It was right now.
Right. And that's a clear legality. Like, that's a clear red line. Like, they cross the red line once you
Yeah,
like
if you
that,
do
right?
that and you upload,
Like, if you just put up that song on Spotify and be like, upload that Spotify and be like, yeah, this is a Billie
if you had
Eilish.
put in the metadata, this was a
rude
Billie
or
Eilish
something.
singing, and then that would have been that right now is clearly not legal. It's not copyright law violation. It's violation of another thing called rights of publicity, which is just, we won't get into the nuances of this law. It's tedious and complicated, but right now we don't know. If you go on YouTube right now and you listen to Bart Simpson singing Drake, which I just did, we don't know if that's illegal yet, and we don't know what side of the coin that's on. If that's an artist using fair use technology to create something new and cool, or if is that someone using tech to fraudulently impersonate protected IP. We don't know, but what we do know is it's happening and it's out there, and there's no shortage of YouTube clips where you can find any artist singing any song by anyone.
Yep. I think even I was listening, like, I think I had tuned into Black Rock Radio, like, for like, you know, like Black Rock City's radio station for Burning Man.
Yeah.
Like, they have this really fun radio. They have a radio station out there, and like, it's really quirky and fun, and it like tells you like wait times on the entry and exodus and all this stuff. But I'm pretty sure they had taken Barack Obama's voice maybe, and we're like having him read a bunch of the like, I don't know, little things, snippets, you know, for their radio shows. And I was like, dude, that's hilarious, but also scary because it sounds just like him.
Deepfakes are a problem, and there's a whole AI Bill of Rights that the current administration has tried to put out, and the European Union is a little more ahead of the US on that regard. But Congress is taking this seriously. There's going to be some regulation, and I think that we had an unusual situation where Sam Altman, who's the founder and CEO of OpenAI, went before Congress and a few months ago and said, will you please regulate this? Because, you know, and I don't know. I'm not a congressional expert, but I don't know of any industry that's ever gone before Congress before and said, can you please regulate us? Like the implications of what can come is just dizzying. And deepfakes we already have enough problem with misinformation out there. So deepfakes that are like really kind of compellingly real, like, could be really problematic. And, you know, in the music industry, it's also a problem. Like, I believe that institutions should be healthy. And, you know, I've worked for 2 major labels. I don't consider myself like a major label person, but, you know, I believe that if major labels own IP, it should be protected. And I believe that consumers should know if this new Beatles outtake they find on YouTube is actually from the estate or if it's been made by a trained model. I think consumers should know that, and that's why we need regulation.
Yeah, I agree totally. Yeah, I think regulation is huge here. there's some things that like I think we've been in tech for like the last 15, 20 years, and like tech historically, like, I actually was doing some lobbying too for a couple of years there, and like on the blockchain side, and we were, really arguing for them to create sandboxes, like, where people could, sandbox would be like basically sort of like a lightweight program that you're entering, and like so that the state knows, who's in the sandbox, what tech companies are working on what there, and then there's some like there's some parameters there, but they can kind of monitor it, and then before basically creating legislation to ban certain technologies or to really to make sweeping legislation that would hurt innovation, essentially. There's this sandbox model that you can kind of propose, and Colorado was really big on it. Nevada was open to it. So it's a really cool model, but like there are ways to do things, a little bit, to slow things down a little bit so that you can see kind of like how the industry is sort of using the technology and what's good, what's bad, and get an idea of how you can protect consumers. That's really always really important with legislators. But yeah, so it's interesting though. So like historically, in the tech industry, we've always wanted regulation to be very, very light touch, right? And to not impede the progress that we're making.
The tech lobbyists have,
but in this instance,
the tech lobbyists have successfully, because I did this at Pandora, is successful. If you kill our royalty rate and you make it so burdensome, well, you're going to have 2,000 people out of work in your district, and that's not good for your reelection efforts. Yeah. And there's some truth to it. Like you want innovation and industry to grow, so for the economy and job creation, but your point is also very, very true. Like there's a downside where that consumers need to be protected.
Yeah, and there I think blockchain was one where it's very, there's some really good uses for blockchain that I think are really positive for society, and there's some that are just like a little bit they're lucrative, but they're riskier, right? And so like
it's too bad that
sometimes you just need some warnings, and
it's the bad stuff that gets the headlines. Like blockchain technology is so much promise for so many things, everything from like making your visit to the DMV easier to like cleaning up paperwork and saving trees, to like rights management in like a Web3 model. Like there's so many great applications of the technology, but the bad stuff, the crypto crash, is what got the headlines, and now blockchain and crypto are kind of inextricably tied together, which they're related, but they're not the same. And I think that's stymied Web3 and blockchain development. And it's too bad, because like I hate filling out the same form at the doctor's office every time I have to go. And I think about it at that level. I'm like, oh my God, my kids are starting a new school year. I got to fill out this paperwork again. I just did this. Like if your database was on a blockchain, then I wouldn't have to do this. I think about it at that level, and that's what I'm like missing. And
I know we were working on a lot of solutions like that, and it like we spent so many years on that, and like, and it's really unfortunate, but like the headlines, are the ones that like, they're just, somebody got scammed. Like last week, I think Vitalik, who is the founder of Ethereum, like he just there was just like a hack. They think it was possible it could have been an inside job at T-Mobile because they were his carrier. Who knows? I mean, there's speculation all over the place of what could have happened, but basically, like, they hacked into his Twitter account, right? And then asked a bunch of people to, like pay for like basically he said he was minting these coins, and a bunch of people opened up their wallets basically. And so that was just like a week ago, and hackers have been trying to get at him in that same way for a couple of years now, so but those are the ones that make the headlines, right?
I know. And not the fact that
really
Estonia, a country which I have visited, now has you can become a citizen of Estonia, a digital citizen of Estonia, and take advantage of all of like Estonian citizenship and certain like and I don't know what exactly what that means, but what things you can take advantage of. But and that's because they were kind of early on this blockchain technology, and that's super cool. Like you could potentially take it.
Estonia has been early. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of good. I mean, we'll digress on a blockchain like episode here, but like there's all sorts of good things like UBI, universal basic income, and things like
financial
that.
transactions settling quickly, like instantaneously instead of there's all different cool applications that are kind of like it's 2023. Like I shouldn't have to like wait 3 days for a bank transfer, stuff like that. But
no, exactly. There's actually a really young entrepreneur. He's been like an entrepreneur since he was like 10 years old or something, but like he's out of Australia, and he's working on a financial company that does financial transactions internationally. And it's like he's like 10 times cheaper than anybody else, and it's almost instantaneous, and it's on the blockchain, and he's making some getting some traction right now, which is cool. But there's so many great use cases. It's interesting. It's almost like AI. The other thing that was hard for with blockchain solutions in general is just like the onboarding of like just the general consumer, right? Like it just wasn't easy to onboard yourself. And so like I think what was really freaky is like ChatGPT drops, or even Midjourney, like 6 months ago or whenever Midjourney came out. And all of a sudden, like casual consumers that are not super technological can create some gorgeous images.
Right. No barrier to entry. You're right. The crypto blockchain thing was like complicated even for people like who are in it with setting up a wallet and keeping your chain. But you're right. Like ChatGPT and text. Everyone can type, so it was like text prompt stuff, and it was
text prompt stuff
fast.
Just like
it was
blew
fast.
Up,
it was accurate, at least mostly in the beginning. Yeah.
So it's like AI is having that moment that blockchain could have used, a couple of years ago. So AI is having that moment right now. So let's we have about 10 minutes left or so. What are some of the promising tools you think are popping up? Like, do you have any favorites on the music side that you've can't live without already?
Tonic Audio.
Yeah, I mean, have you said no? I wasn't fishing for a Tonic Audio spot, but that was awesome.
Well,
just AI tools that you really like that you think would actually benefit like indie artists.
Yes, there are. And before I talk about kind of specific companies, I think the thing that I'm thinking about mostly is that someone smarter than me, someone I met the other day who teaches data analytics and kind of music demographics at Northeastern, estimates that there's about 1.8 million musicians in kind of considered in North America, Western Europe, like that are kind of participating in real music making. And by that, I mean, they've spent some time on their craft. They can play an instrument or sing incredibly well. They know how to use a DAW. They've recorded competently. They've released music in some capacity. Not all these people are, professional full-time musicians, but they've tried to play a show. They consider themselves musicians as part of their identity. And I think in 10 years that 1.8 million is going to be 100 million. And I think there's so much out there for people to explore, and it's going to be driven by creator tools. And if you trace back the history of recording, if you wanted to make a demo that was half listenable on a cassette in 1988, for example, you needed $10,000 and access to a real recording studio with an engineer, and it was hard and expensive. 100%. And then once you made the cassette, getting that to an audience, forget it. That's the gatekeepers of the old industry and the retail ecosystem and all that.
Yeah.
And now you can record a really great sounding recording on GarageBand, which comes free on every iPhone, and that takes part of the recording piece. And then you have companies like Splice and Beat App that are like marketplaces for beats and music, and so you can kind of start to compose with these other tools. But we're about to enter a world, and Boomy and a little bit BandLab are kind of the first. But we're entering a world where you can make really credible music that sounds good and is compelling to a listener on some gamified app. You don't need any musical training to do so. And as someone who learned theory and played my instrument for years and really cared about it, I don't know if this is amazing or terrifying, but I think the next pop star is someone who's never, maybe didn't think about making music one day, and they wake up the next day and they download one of these apps that turns the music making process like you're playing Candy Crush, and they make some interesting, cool music. So I think that is an example of AI assisting the process and not replacing it, because the difference is still going to be a person has to put in the right text prompt and has to edit or sequence or do something to the music once they've created it in a way that is unique to the way they hear things and see the world. And I think that we're going to have a lot of music out there. So there's some tools out there, and Tonic Audio is one that's trying to create a community where people can kind of give feedback and learn and share. And I think those tools are going to be important because, when you have 100 million people out in the wilderness making music, like, you got to segment yourself in some way.
Yep.
It's not clear that all these songs are going to be royalty bearing. The DSPs and the labels and the distributors now are currently having a conversation around, okay, this is just too much music. Like we can't treat everything the same, and not everything can be royalty bearing. So I think we're going to have some like segmentation around what's considered like commercial music and what's kind of considered entertainment. But I think that's going to color a lot of how the industry and how creators think about the next 10 years. So there's, any tool out there that will help you do that, I think is going to be, have a chance to be important.
Yeah, I totally agree. The hard part is, there's, I don't want to get into specifics because I don't want to harsh anybody's mellow, but there are a lot of tools that are trying that right now. And just as you described, it's like as easy as Candy Crush, right? The hard part, and I think for us, fundamentally as a company, we're really bullish on the creative process. For us, streaming, I think you and I talked about this before, right now there's, tens of thousands of songs uploaded every day, right? But eventually it's going to be 1 million songs a day uploaded, right? And like you mentioned, there's no way you can't create, you can't count them all as this, you can't value them all the same. It's a administrative nightmare, right? The metadata on 100, 1 million songs a day, that's crazy.
Distributors can't, they don't have server space for that. The DSPs don't have server space for that. Yeah.
No, it's just too much, right? So for us, we're really betting heavily on this idea that when you have such an oversupply in the market, it fundamentally brings the value to zero for most things. Yes, you'll have the Taylor Swift that will be she's gonna have $1 billion portfolio of songs, whatever, but for most people, those songs are going to be almost worth nothing, right? And so for us, we're that puts the onus really on figuring out how to, as a music tech company, how to make money on the creative process, And for us, just the way that we see music creation, we're okay, the music creation process is a really enjoyable process. You learned a bunch of music theory, learning music theory is enjoyable, if you're into music theory, it is cool, and to know that nobody can take that away from you.
I'm thinking about all the poor kids whose parents made them take violin and piano lessons and hated it. But no, you're right.
I know, right? Yeah. Those poor
but no, you're right.
But
I cared. I wanted to know I wanted to know what a harmonic minor was. Yes. And I wanted to know what Phrygian was.
Right.
Yes, I wanted to know that Lydian was the sharp chord.
Right.
Yeah, I cared.
you cared, right? And so like for us, we're like, there is also a segment. There will be so many more musicians, crafting songs in the next 5-10 years. But like for us as a company, we're like, we want to go after those people and support those artists that care about the creative process. You know what I mean? Like care about the nuts and bolts of it, care about, the instruments they're using, care about the sounds that they're choosing to download, to add to their mixes, like all that stuff. Like, so to me, I'm like, okay, like the creative process itself is going to have to carry a lot of I feel like the economic
interesting. Because the output
is
not. And that's a really
there's no way that the
that's
output
an interesting
can.
way to think about it. Because right now the output is what matters. And if you're an artist or a master rights holder or a publisher, the creative part is just a sunk cost to get to the outcome, which is the output.
Yeah.
But 100 million people, the output can't be valued as much. So you're right. Yeah. And I think that your company,
it's going to always be approached.
You're right. And there's a lot of kind of distributors out there are working to kind of add value to creators. Like TuneCore is kind of heavily invested in creator tools, and CD Baby's trying to do the same. And United Masters, a company that I really like, has all different kinds of tools for their users, like everything from get a chance to be in an NBA commercial to here's some coaching. There's a great distributor called Hard Drive, and
I've never heard of
HRDRV.
Yeah.
It's founded by a really great dynamic woman named Michaela Shiloh, who was a songwriter. She wrote for Janet Jackson and a bunch of other pop stars. And she's providing like not only just here's a distributor, but here's a community. They do like meet an expert. They have mental health coaches available from artists. They provide like cover art help and things to help creators, because going back to what we talked about before, it's too much to manage. It's a lot, and there's a lot of distributors out there. Like CD Baby isn't the only game in town anymore. There's probably 15 I could name that have some kind of scale. So in order to attract some of these burgeoning creators, you do have to offer a little more than just upload your music, we'll press a button and we'll take 15%.
Exactly. Yep, I agree. And I think it's going to become more interactive as well. I mean, we keep hearing, you and I keep seeing, all sorts of posts about, fan engagement, and there's platforms, popping up for fan engagement.
Yeah.
But as you blur, like you blur these three categories of like gaming, music, and visual arts, like, and media, like when you blur all those together, like you're going to get so many different outcomes, like so many different permutations of everything under the sun, basically. So I think we're going to just see like people wanting to be more interactive, like you're going to want to, like, you might want to be inside of a game and see your favorite artists, like we're seeing all these big artists like jump onto Roblox, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Community. They're looking for community.
They're looking for community, and they're looking for, like, I think that the artist creation is going to be blurring with like the fans, and like, I think fans will start to have more input over the artist creation than they have in the past, because it will be such a multiplayer experience.
You're right. That's the complete confluence of gaming. And there's like SoundCloud has that model where, you can comment on the track as it plays, and the musician get feedbacks. And I know that you're doing similar kinds of things in your marketplace. So
yep,
you're right.
Yeah. We have that. And like, but like, I think if you combine that with some like AI tools that are a little bit more like what you described, like Candy Crush level of difficulty, you add those to them, and now you've got like all of a sudden like Mickey Shiloh's like, oh shoot, like I actually really like that. I'm going to put that in my next track, like a fan upload something. And you're like, holy crap. Like now they're not just engaging with their fans, but they're like co-creating with their fans almost. And so like, then what does that look like royalty wise? Right. Like, so anyways, there's so many permutations in the future of like, of co-creating and But yeah, we could go on forever, but this has been amazing. And I'm so glad you joined us today.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed the conversation. And we'll talk again soon.
Yeah. We'll talk again soon. Thanks, Drew.